Zamfara State Governor Dauda Lawal says he has enough facts to show that the federal government is secretly negotiating with some bandits who abducted some schoolgirls in the state. Well, the latest comments come from the Northwest Governor follows a denial by the federal government that it has not mandated anyone or any group of persons to negotiate on behalf of the government with the criminals. Well, the governor, who has consistently ruled out the option of dealing with bandits, is now threatening to expose the agents of the federal government behind the secret negotiation with bandits. In a statement, the spokesperson of the governor, Suleiman Bala Idris, accused the information minister of discrediting the state government's claim without verifying it first.
We're now joined by Honorable Aliyu Gebi, who is a former advisor to the former Minister of Interior, a former member of the House of Representatives and ECOWAS Parliament. He's the National Coordinator of the Security Governance Initiative. Good to see you and thanks for your time. Well, it looks like a confusing one here. And first, we've had this conversation before here on Arise, talking about reiterating what the President has said, working in synergy. What do you think may have happened here in this case?
Thank you very much, Suleiman. And it's again a tragedy. It shouldn't have happened, frankly speaking. And we should be focused on, one, preventing such a tragedy from happening. And if the unfortunate event happens, then we should rescue. It shouldn't be a one negotiated release and so on and so forth. We must show the capacity to rescue by force if need be. That would also serve as a deterrent. But clearly what is happening from my point of view between federal government and state government is perhaps a breakdown in communications. And in these types of mediations and negotiations, of course, first you start from the covert, using back channels, ultra quiet, ultra secret, only a few people would know, even within the government cycles. But it seems it has moved too fast, too quickly from the covert to the overt, just as the purported video showed, where you had gunmen allegedly coming out to negotiate with elements of government, and it seemed a bit haphazard and ad hoc. But be that as it may, the governor could be right to say he is not aware because of how secret it can be, and considering the fact that the agencies of government who are tasked by the Constitution to handle these types of matters operate at the center. But having said that, it is also prudent to mention that it is important for the governor of the state to be aware of what the federal government is doing, so that there's synergy and there's proper coordination, so inadvertently the one will not scuttle the other because they did not know what the other one was doing. And it's important again to highlight, this calls for a synergy of concepts of operations. Our SOPs are at variance with one another, and there needs to be a policy framework and a legal framework for these types of things. First and foremost, who are the facilitators? Who are the facilitators on the side of the criminals? Who are the facilitators on the side of legitimate government? Who are the influencers? Who are the negotiators? Who are the mediators? So federal government and state government need to come together to agree and accept a type of platform where these things would be coordinated by the center in a very cohesive manner. Failure to do so, you could have a facilitator from the government side that is not known by the state government, or vice versa. We're all working towards the same end to ensure that this criminality comes to an end. But if you're going to negotiate, you have to negotiate from a clear terms of a legal framework and a policy framework. Otherwise, it would end up in chaos.
I mean, you've made a very, very important points. I'm wondering how, where to begin to unpack them from. So what you're saying essentially is that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the federal government and her agents in negotiating secretly. Nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
How exactly
absolutely not.
Should government go about this in a way that it doesn't, bungle the whole thing at the end of the day? Excellent. What's the ideal situation?
The ideal situation is, first and foremost, there has to be a ramp up of kinetic efforts. You have to pound the adversary to the point where you've provided a level playing field, a conducive environment for non-kinetic operations. If you want to talk and the adversary does not want to talk, it's an exercise in futility. So we have to ramp up, sustain military campaign. The kinetic must degrade, dismantle to the point where the adversary is begging us to come out to talk. So when the adversary wants to talk, the adversary knows that there are influencers within its own circles who have not picked up weapons that can signal governments at different levels, from the local government level, the state, up to the federal government. We need to talk, we want to talk. Then you begin to explore the possibilities of talks. In fact, usually you have pre talks or talks about talks. So at that point, you have to look at, is it ripe to actually go into a negotiated settlement, a political settlement, or is it that the government is eager and these guys are reluctant? So we have to have that clarity and that clarification. Number two, if you look at, for example, the Borno model, which is something that the world is looking at very, very closely, it has succeeded in integrating vertically and horizontally federal government, state government, local government, and the community level. And this is why you have these masses of surrenders. And these surrenders are happening because you have the political coordination by the governor, but you have the enabling environment that has been provided by the military. So it is win-win. So of course, right now, everyone is keying in behind the state government, which is the legitimate authority at the subnational level, to key into whatever peace process there is, because the time is right. The situation is ripe for a negotiated settlement and for mass exits. But when you look at the Northwest, which is quite different from the Northeast, you have many adversaries fighting between themselves, contending for space, criminal organizations. So if you are talking with 3 and there are 7, and there are 4 that are not keyed into this proposal that you're presenting, then of course, again, it's an exercise in futility because you are providing more terrain for the others to obscure what you're doing and perhaps to even disrupt it. So that policy framework is what the government will use to harmonize between federal government and the state government to agree on an SOP. This is how it's going to be. This is the definition for a facilitator, a mediator, an influencer, and a negotiator. Once that is done, the state government, as the legitimate authority at the subnational level, can coordinate with the federal government keying into it. But absolutely, the intelligence agencies of the federal government have every right, opportunity, responsibility to go into secret talks, but not to blow them into the open until it is ripe. So the state governor can say he does not know, but it will be difficult for us to say at this point from our own point of view. He does not know, being the chairman of the State Security Council, where you have the DSS, you have the police, you have the military, etc., and etc.
But again, quickly here, how is it possible that all of a sudden we are witnessing the resurgence? There seemed to be a lot before, but now it's more like the kidnappings coming from these criminals have increased.
But you have also, you're absolutely correct, but there are 2 things at play. One is politics. You can't extricate politics from these types of things. If you look at my former colleague, Bello Matoole, who was governor and now is Minister of Defense, from a different party, from the governor on the ground, who is from now the opposition party. However, having said this, we have to understand that Bello Matoole, even while he was in the National Assembly, the 7th Assembly, he was part of Goodluck Jonathan's negotiation team, led by Tanim, then of the Northeast. So he has experience in negotiating from the perspective of the federal government. And when he became a governor, while he was in the opposition then, he did record giant strides in terms of perhaps bringing the adversary to the table. Whether the negotiations were successful or not remains to be debated because, again, of a lack of a cohesive, properly articulated legal policy framework. Now you have a governor who is coming from a different component of society, won the election, is in the opposition, has a different understanding of what needs to be done, and perhaps is detached from the politics that is on the ground and is new, how many months so he is likely to bring a fresh set of eyes to what the problem is, and is likely to have less entanglements with whatever the causes are. But however, unless and the NSA or the president brings these 2 together, former governor who sees himself perhaps having another term in office, making another play for another 4 years since he served only 1 term, and the new governor in the opposition party, unless their purpose is harmonized, there is likely to be problem. And the platform to harmonize these efforts, of course, is the federal government. You have the office of the NSA who can coordinate, who can direct. But the tools of the federal government are also available to the executive governor of Zamfara state.
So how do you now address the political dimension to this terrorism? Is it further complicating this war on terror? How do you even see this, panning out?
Excellent. First and foremost, we have to situate what is happening in Zamfara state and environs in its proper context. This is organized crime. It is not terrorism. There is no political agenda other than just to cause havoc and terror around, but it's not actually terrorism because it is devoid of a political agenda. And we have to dismantle this symbiotic organized criminal insurgencies before it becomes a terrorist movement. Now, the politics in it, of course, it's easy to oversimplify the issue and say it is the Fulanis who are aggrieved against the Hausa and Sakai. Everybody, like I told you, Sulaiman, a long time ago, everybody in Nigeria is aggrieved. You are aggrieved, I am aggrieved, my wife is aggrieved, my children are aggrieved.
I hope you're not leaving me out of the
You are also aggrieved, but grievances have ways of being channeled to find resolution. You don't pick up arms and unleash havoc on society that even affects your own people. So those who are innocent will also be affected. But there needs to be space for people to talk. There needs to be place for people to dialogue. But the federal government and indeed the state government must not dialogue from a position of weakness. We have to dialoge from a position of
Now
strength.
you're talking about the federal government and the state, talking about that politics and the denial. Let's listen to the NYSC staff who has a thing to say which the government
The
is
NYSC
already
boss, actually.
the government is already denying.
Right, let's see it.
To make contact with the bandits. But you know, this contact, we can never present ourselves as government officials or security agencies. It is contact that we're making in disguise as parents. Within this period, I've already made contact with the parents of these children, some of them. I have their phone numbers, like 3 or 4 of them. I've started talking with them, and I told them I'm on ground to see what was happening.
So that's the DG of the NYSC there.
Well, you see, what the DG is talking about, from my understanding of what he just said, is speaking after the fact. After the children have been taken and phone numbers are used to ask ransom and so on and so forth. But we are talking about mitigating the situation and resolving the problem. So unless we find a comprehensive way of addressing these issues, they will keep recording. If you recall, this is probably happening because of what happened in Chibok. They took Chibok, the Chibok girls, and because, again, there was no clear SOP, defined policy framework to ensure that it never happened again.
And that's a good place to leave it. Thank you so much. Aliyu Gebi is National Coordinator, Security Governance Initiative. Thanks so much for joining us on Newsnight.